Hey guys, this is Jimmy coming at you with another video for you guys today. So I know it's a little late since this event happened, and I just wanted to do this video for quite some time, but apparently I had other stuff in the way. And I was hoping to get this one uploaded last Sunday, but unfortunately I had some errands to run and having to babysit my little nephew. Yeah, so I finally had some free time on my hands, and I just want to get this review out of the way. So this is just going to be some brief thoughts concerning about the beach break episode of AEW Dynamite, as well as my thoughts on the overall main event of this past week's Dynamite involving MJF and CM Punk. So I'm just going to dive into that in a little bit, but just want to get the beach break stuff out of the way. I definitely thought that this was a definitely amazing show. Very strong opening match between Cody Rhodes and Sammy Guevara. The latter match to determine the undisputed TNT champion. So I definitely like a bit of a callback to the IC title match from WrestleMania 10 with Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels. So they kind of did a similar concept with that. Long story short, so the New Year's episode of Dynamite had Cody Rhodes defeating Sammy Guevara to become a 3-time TNT champion. And then they were supposed to have a match at Battle for the Belts, but unfortunately Cody was believed to have been tested positive for COVID, so they had his brother Dustin to replace him to take on Sammy instead. So since Sammy did defeat Dustin to become the interim TNT champion, so this kind of comes to a full head here at the Beach Break episode. And yeah, like I said, just a very phenomenal match, just a great way to open up the show. You know, going into it, I knew it was going to be amazing because, you know, a lot of these ladder matches, especially when it comes to AEW, tend to not disappoint. So a pretty good track record. And yeah, some pretty cool spots, like especially with Cody Rhodes doing that amazing delayed vertical suplex from the top of the ladder. And, you know, they even did some cool stuff using that weapon. But the main highlight of that ladder match was Sammy Guevara, and did like an amazing diamond cutter from the top of the ladder. Just replaying that footage again, it's like so ingrained in my head now. And, you know, and it just, like, it shows a lot of talent, especially for a guy like Sammy, especially pulling off these high-flying moves and, you know, like the 630 splashes. And, you know, speaking of that, he even did that off the top of the ladder to Cody onto another ladder that was stacked between the barricade and the ring post. So I thought that was actually really cool. Then you have Fuego del Sol coming out there, just basically sort of a retread of the Battle of the Belts match that Sammy had with Dustin. Fuego, you know, because this was at a point where Cody tried to pull off a devastating stomp onto Sammy's leg. Like, he had his opponent's leg tucked within the ladder, and Fuego del Sol coming out there to insist Cody not to do it. But despite that, Cody gives him a tiger driver. But this would give Sammy enough time to fight back, and you know, eventually he would successfully retrieve the 2 TNT title belts hanging above the rafters. So he would become the undisputed TNT champion there. You know, I know a lot of folks were kind of very lukewarm, especially when it came to Sammy's first TNT title reign. And, you know, he was stuck feuding with Men of the Year since he and Jericho were kind of caught in that crossfire with Dan Lambert and his MMA team. And then they did that multi-man tag between Inner Circle and American Top Team at Full Gear. So Sammy just never really kind of found his groove with the title. Eventually he manages to bounce back, and that ladder match kind of reinvigorated his momentum, I guess you could say. And with this second TNT title reign, hopefully he finds more opponents to feud with, and ones that are going to help benefit him in the long haul. So we just have to wait and see how that title reign turns out. Like I said, just a very amazing ladder match. And we're only in the beginning of 2022, so it's definitely, without a doubt, it's going to be up there on the list of match of the year candidate. But it's amazing. Like, it's very early in the year now, and we're now in February as of the time I'm uploading this video. But yeah, it just really reignited the flair of Sammy Guevara, and especially with Cody Rhodes. Not to take away his performance in that match as well. I don't know if he'll ever even turn heel at this point, because I know he's been cutting all these promos saying that he'll never turn heel, and he's just working up the crowd and whatnot. I think at this point he may have to turn heel, but he might already be a heel, and we just don't seem to, like, it's not directly in your face that he's a heel. It's kind of like, kind of the showing like that tweener shades of gray type of role. I don't know. It's definitely Cena-like to a certain degree. Hopefully they do something interesting with him instead of just having the fans just boo him all the time. We did have a few matches after that with Wardlow in that handicap match, and just really selling his character. And I definitely really am digging the Wardlow character, and just seeing him just plow through all these local enhancement talent, and just selling that powerbomb move like it's the most devastating powerbomb that you'll ever see in wrestling. And they definitely really done a good job with Wardlow. And even when we first saw him, he was just kind of like the corner man to MJF and nothing else. But the past several months, we've kind of seen him kind of break off a little bit into his singles run, and he's just destroying everyone left and right, utilizing that powerbomb multiple times, which he would eventually dub it as the Powerbomb Symphony. Sort of like the WWE equivalent to what Brock Lesnar's been known for with Suplex City. It's kind of like that here in AEW. Wardlow's definitely got a great build, a great kind of character, and the fans are really catching on to him. Even I'm catching on to him as well. So yeah, I mean, they've been kind of teasing some dissension going on between him and MJF, and especially the whole Pinnacle stable. And they've actually done a really good job at that. And I'll get a little more into the whole MJF situation in a little bit. But I'm definitely really digging Wardlow so far. And I definitely look forward to see what they'll do from here on out. But, he's definitely going to be, by the time that spring arrives, Wardlow's going to be like this big fan favorite. And, and we'll see what happens from there. And then you had like that 6-man tag match with the Inner Circle taking on Daniel Garcia and 2.0, which is, just a pretty solid TV style match. Nothing, it wasn't necessarily like ladder match amazing, like with Sammy and Cody, but I mean, it definitely did its job. It was still a pretty solid pace of a match, more of like an angle advancement, considering that they've been teasing dissension between Jericho and Santana and Ortiz. So there's a little bit of dissension within the ranks of the Inner Circle, and they've been playing that up for the past several weeks. Eddie Kingston's also kind of, has this whole beef with Jericho, and Santana and Ortiz have been kind of branching out on their own as a tag team, racking up some wins. It seemed like now they've kind of gotten to a point where they may not need Jericho as of this point. With the Inner Circle, it's one of those stables that kind of overstayed their welcome, to be honest. Like when they first formed on the first Dynamite, I mean, they're basically doing their role and protecting Chris Jericho and his world title. But, now that he hasn't been world champion in like nearly 2 years at this point. So, I mean, they've mostly been lackeys for Jericho. And, even Sammy and Jake Hager kind of have their, they kind of play a more significant part in the stable besides Jericho. But it seemed like Santana Ortiz kind of got the short end of the stick. But it seemed like when they went babyface and they had a little temporary hiatus with the Inner Circle, so Santana and Ortiz have been focusing on their tag team run, and they've been kind of winning matches. But they never really won the tag team titles, even when they first started forming. And, it's kind of one of the things that irks me, especially with the, like with these stables in AEW. It's like when you have so many stables at a time, like certain wrestlers within their respective groups tend to get lost in the shuffle. One of my criticisms, especially when it comes to AEW, as far as the possible oversaturation of all these factions or stables, what have you. It seems like they're finally having direction with Santana and Ortiz. I mean, having them sniff the tag team gold. I mean, especially as far as being number one contenders are concerned, they're definitely overdue for one. Who knows? This might be the first step into transitioning over into that role. Seeing what Santana and Ortiz are gonna do, like once possibly if the inner circle breaks up, because it seems like it's become more and more apparent since they aren't as close like they used to be. So I think the chances of that are pretty substantially high. I'm very interested to see what they'll do with Jericho and Kingston. No doubt in my mind that's going to happen at Revolution. So that'll be interesting as well. But yeah, the Inner Circle did win that match, even despite their little falling out there. And then you had the Lights Out match with Adam Cole and Orange Cassidy, which is still pretty good. And they basically utilized that non-sanctioned rules where they're basically fighting all over the arena and falls count anywhere. So basically utilizing that to their advantage. So some pretty cool stuff. They're fighting through the crowd. Eventually they went backstage for a bit, followed up by a crash pad spot towards the end of the match. Very anticlimactic ending, to be honest, with Orange Cassidy just giving Adam Cole a hug, and then they basically just landed onto that crash pad table. Man, we see a lot of that in AEW with those crash pad tables. I mean, Adam Cole up to this point has been on like this winning streak since he debuted in August when he showed up for the first time at All Out. So he's kind of been on a tear as well. And even though this was a non-sanctioned match and he came up short, but this actually does not count as a loss, considering he was never truly pinned in the middle of the ring. Yeah, so this was like I said, just a pretty good match, and Orange Cassidy did at least get something out of this. He's still over with the fans. I mean, he's not a complete afterthought, but it's kind of hard to believe. Like over a year ago, he was feuding with Chris Jericho, and even despite winning a few series of matches with him, but he's just kind of he's been stagnant. He did get a world title shot back in like this past summer with Kenny Omega in that three-way dance they had with Pac. I mean, it's not like a complete flop, but he's still like up there, like upper mid-card type position, not necessarily main event status. They definitely have done pretty well, I would say, with Orange Cassidy. And Adam Cole, like I said, has just been going through a hot streak, so there's a possible chance that he may perhaps be in line for a world title shot against Hangman Adam Page, who just won the world title from Kenny Omega this past November. I could see him be a viable challenger to face Hangman Page, considering Hangman's feud with the Elite, and now that Adam Cole is part of the Elite and Kenny Omega's kind of taking his sabbatical, so I could see Cole just getting back at Page for having his teammate lose the title, but now he's willing to bring the gold back to the Elite, that kind of thing. So yeah, I could easily see that happening at Revolution. That'll also be something to look forward to. But yeah, I think that's really my brief thoughts on the Beach Break edition of AEW Dynamite. Just an amazing episode overall. So I might as well just go out my way and discuss about the match that had been in the making for about 3 months at this point. And that match I'm referring to is the anticipated bout between MJF and CM Punk. So, Punk had been around AEW since August. He had made his return to wrestling after 7 years. And, he's been, also going through a winning streak like Adam Cole has been going through. Once MJF kind of had his thing going on with Darby Allin, so he's taken out of the equation. So, eventually there happens to be this anticipated confrontation with the two wrestlers I've mentioned. When I thought about the idea of CM Punk possibly joining AEW. Well, one of the first wrestlers I was looking forward to seeing him feud was, in fact, MJF. So just seeing like how Maxwell Jacob Friedman has really come to his own, especially now that he's been a heel. He's like this most despicable villain of the entire AEW roster, and he's just just stuck up, arrogant jackass that just believes in himself, believes in his own hype, and just really putting that over to perfection. So that kind of had me thinking is like, what would happen? Just seeing MJF and CM Punk having a war of words would just be like the greatest piece of television in wrestling that I've seen. And when they first confronted each other, that ended up becoming a spectacle in reality. Just look up that promo where they had their first confrontation, like during the opening segment on Dynamite. I believe maybe like the one after like Full Gear. It was just a sight to see. The crowd were really buying it, and they were just roasting each other. MJF just trashing CM Punk about how he alienated all his wrestling fans. He walked out on them. Like, I looked up to you, Punk, but I was a fan just as much as they are, but, you turned on them like you turned on me, kind of thing. And now he's back in wrestling, and, he's been kind of getting inside Punk's skin and just pushing a lot of buttons. And, Punk also, doing what he can to back his stance up, and, just having to kind of undergo so much turmoil in the years since he left WWE, and how he managed to make a comeback and just rekindling his love for professional wrestling once again. So that's kind of the theme that kind of plays throughout CM Punk's character. So, he spent the first few months in the company just really racking up wins and, finding his love for wrestling once again by taking on all these newcomers. Yeah, so they spent the next several months just really building up their rivalry, and, Punk is willing to take on MJF, try to put him in his place, but a lot of the times that's happened, 9 times out of 10, MJF would just completely turn down the offer. Like, I'm not going to face you, Punk. And he's just been kind of teasing, and then even trolling him along the way when he has all his teammates to face Punk instead, like, Sean Spears, and only to get his ass kicked in less than a minute. And then that match with Wardlow that cemented Wardlow into a bona fide superstar. But, Punk eventually overcame the odds. Eventually, this kind of builds into a match here in Chicago, CM Punk's hometown. And this was definitely a really amazing match. And it was very surprising because they had this main event not open up the show like they did with Bryan Danielson and Adam Page, but they actually had this as the last match on the show. And the interesting thing also to note is that this happened like right around the 9:15-ish hour, which kind of surprised me that it started off really early, because my gut instinct told me that this match would go on for the remainder of the show. Early on in that match, Punk and MJF brawled it at the crowd, did some really cool stuff with the guardrail, like when CM Punk landed MJF right in his groin on the stair rail, and eventually they take matters back in the ring. So so just MJF also relying on some rest holds to wear down CM Punk. So that's kind of like a recurring theme you see throughout that match. But eventually there was a moment where MJF resorted to using a wristband or some kind of like object where he's like choking the life out of CM Punk to a point where he just ends up passing out. Like, he was using a sleeper hold, and he has that wristband of sorts and just wrapping it right around the throat of Punk and causing Punk to pass out. We thought at the time, or at least me as a viewer, just in my eyes, that I thought for sure that I was like, wait, what? MJF actually beat Punk? I was like, that's it? And like CM Punk's arms were raised like 3 times, and and then eventually his arms just he couldn't respond or fight back for that matter. So it was believed that MJF won the match, but then the referee noticed something unusual, so eventually convincing Justin Roberts as the ring announcer to restart the match. So eventually they do restart the match. MJF and Punk just continue to go on a marathon, and Wardlow came down there. They had a confrontation with CM Punk. It's like Punk's just insisting Wardlow not to interfere in the match. Like, he's just very cautious of what intentions he may have. This would eventually bite Punk back in the ass, and MJF would utilize the football ring that he has, and then just clubbing it on the Punk, getting the cover while the referee's distracted, gets the 1-2-3 for MJF to defeat CM Punk, not only breaking his winning streak, but also defeating Punk in his hometown. And the crowd was just completely deflated. I actually got a little bit of an instinct that maybe Punk would eventually, find a way to outsmart MJF and to potentially win the match after the match was started. But instead we saw MJF beating Punk not once but twice in one match. It's definitely got me intrigued just to see what they'll do. We'll likely see a rubber match at Revolution. Not sure if they'll add some kind of match stipulation, but if they do indeed go in that route of Punk and MJF one more time. But yeah, they've actually done a really good job with the match, and and Wardlow's activity, especially like where he stands in this whole debacle. Like, it seemed like he had a bit of a falling out with the Pinnacle, and next thing you know, he's on good terms with them. So I definitely really like the mind games there. And it kind of reminds me of what they did with Batista when he was in Evolution in late 2004, early 2005. And they were kind of teasing it, and the fans ate it up. And then, like Royal Rumble happens, Batista wins it. And they've been showing signs of him turning babyface. And then after No Way Out, when it was believed that, Batista had his thing going on with JBL, and it was a very clear indicator that Batista was gonna face Triple H and turn on his Evolution buddies, especially his mentor, and just trolling Triple H when he just decided to sign the World Heavyweight title contract. So I thought they actually did a really good job with that, and I could easily see them doing the same thing with Wardlow and knock it in the home run. Definitely really very optimistic to see what they'll do from here. Yeah, just a really amazing match overall, and I can't stress that enough. Yeah, so what you guys' thoughts are concerning about the latest storylines and feuds going on in AEW lately. Thank you all guys for watching, and till next time, this is Jimmy signing out.